Have you ever noticed that even on days when nothing goes wrong, you still feel tense, like your body's bracing for impact? Maybe you're answering emails, chatting with friends, doing all the normal day-to-day things, but underneath, there's this constant hum of pressure that never really goes away. You tell yourself, "I'm fine, I just need to get through this week." But that week turns into, If this sounds like you, I want you to know you're not alone. So many people in their 20s and 30s are quietly living with this kind of background stress. It's not always dramatic, no panic attacks, no breakdowns, but it's steady. The tricky part? Because it's invisible, you might downplay it or think you just need to toughen up. But stress isn't just a feeling, it's a signal. It's your mind and body's way of telling you something here needs attention. And when 2016, in this video, we're going to explore exactly how stress affects you, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and the small, realistic steps you can take to feel lighter again. We'll talk about the hidden signs, the science in simple terms, and the everyday habits that can help you shift from survival mode to actually feeling like yourself again. So let's start with the first sign that the weight you're carrying might be heavier than you think. The invisible weight you're carrying. There's a kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. You can go to bed early, get a full 8 hours, and still wake up feeling like you've already run a marathon before the day even begins. It's not about being lazy or unmotivated. It's something heavier, something you can't quite see, but you feel it in every part of your body and mind. This is the invisible weight so many of us carry without realizing it. On the outside, you might look perfectly fine. You show up to work, send your emails, chat with friends, even smile in photos. People might say, "You're doing great." But inside, it's a different story. Every task, even the small ones, feels like moving through thick mud. You keep pushing because that's what you've always done, but you can feel your energy draining faster than it used to. Sometimes this weight builds slowly. It's the combination of unanswered messages, bills you've been meaning to pay, an unresolved argument, or even just the mental noise of keeping track of too many things at once. None of them seem big enough to take you down on their own, but together, they pile up until you're carrying more than you can see or name. Imagine wearing a backpack that gets a little heavier every day. At first, you don't notice. You adjust your posture, walk a little slower, maybe take more breaks. But over time, it's not just your shoulders that ache, it's your whole body. And here's the thing. Because you can't take off this backpack and show it to someone, it's easy to convince yourself it's not that bad. You might tell yourself, "I should be able to handle this," or "Other people have it worse." That self-talk doesn't make the weight lighter. In fact, it often makes it heavier because now you're carrying the load and the guilt of thinking you're not strong enough. I once talked to a woman who described it perfectly. She said, "I feel like I'm running a race no one told me I signed up for, and I don't know when it ends." She wasn't in crisis. She was functioning, meeting deadlines, even making plans with friends. But her inner world was filled with exhaustion and the constant feeling of being behind. If you've ever felt that way, here's what you need to remember. The weight is real. Just because it's invisible doesn't mean it's imagined. It's your mind and body's way of saying, something's too heavy right now. Acknowledging that is not weakness. It's the first step toward putting it down. You don't have to fix everything today. You don't have to do it alone, but you do need to notice when you're carrying more than your share, because the sooner you see it, the sooner you can make space to breathe again. And to do that, it helps to understand what's happening inside your brain when you've been under this pressure for too long. So let's talk about how stress can actually rewire the way your mind works. How stress rewires your brain. Most of us think of stress as a feeling, being tense, anxious, or overwhelmed. But stress isn't just something you feel in the moment. When it sticks around for too long, it changes you from the inside out. And one of the biggest places it leaves its mark is your brain. The changes happen quietly, so you might not connect them to stress at all. Instead, you just notice that you're more forgetful than before. You snap at people over small things, or you struggle to focus on even simple tasks. And you start to wonder, what's wrong with me? Here's what's really going on. When you're under stress, your body releases a hormone called cortisol. In short bursts, cortisol is a lifesaver. It sharpens your focus, quickens your reaction time, and helps you deal with challenges. It's like your body's built-in alarm system. But that alarm was never meant to stay on all the time. When stress becomes constant, your brain ends up bathing in cortisol day after day, and that's when the wiring starts to change. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that helps you make decisions, think logically, and control impulses, can actually shrink over time when exposed to too much cortisol. Think of it like the CEO of your brain getting tired and stepping away from their desk more often. You're left with less oversight, so decisions get harder and emotional reactions get louder. Meanwhile, your amygdala, which is responsible for detecting threats and triggering fear or strong emotions, starts to grow and become more active. It's like turning up the volume on your internal alarm, so even small inconveniences can feel like major crises. That's why you might find yourself overreacting to things that wouldn't have bothered you in the past. Then there's the hippocampus, the brain's memory keeper. This area helps you store new information and recall past experiences. Chronic stress weakens it, which can explain why you walk into a room and forget why you're there, or why you reread the same sentence 3 times without absorbing it. None of this means you're broken or doomed to stay this way. The brain is remarkably adaptable, a concept called neuroplasticity. Just as stress can reshape your brain in negative ways, healthy habits can help it recover and even rebuild. Things like exercise, mindfulness, good sleep, creative hobbies, and regular social connection can literally encourage new brain cells to grow and restore balance between thinking and feeling. It's like tending to a neglected garden. At first, it takes effort to clear away the weeds, but over time, new growth starts to take over. When you understand that your brain is responding to its environment, not betraying you, it becomes easier to approach healing with patience instead of self-blame. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What does my brain need right now?" And that shift changes everything. Now that we know stress can reshape your brain, let's explore how those changes spill over into your emotions, sometimes in ways you don't even notice, until you've been stuck there for a while. The emotional trap: anxiety, irritability, and numbness. When stress starts to rewire your brain, the effects don't stop at memory or decision-making. They spill over into your emotional world. And often, this is where it gets tricky, because emotions can be harder to notice and name until they've already taken hold. For some people, it shows up as anxiety, not always the heart-pounding, can't-breathe kind you see in movies, but a constant undercurrent of restlessness. It's the feeling that something bad is about to happen, even when nothing's wrong. Your thoughts race ahead, your chest feels tight, and you keep replaying conversations or worrying about things you can't control. For others, the emotional shift looks like irritability. You're quicker to snap at people, even the ones you care about. Little things, traffic, slow Wi-Fi, a misplaced set of keys, trigger a bigger reaction than they should. You might notice you apologize more often, saying, "Sorry, I'm just tired," without realizing that the real culprit is emotional overload. And then there's numbness. This one can be sneaky because it doesn't necessarily feel bad at first. It's the quiet slipping away of joy. Things you used to love, your favorite music, a good meal, time with friends, don't bring the same spark anymore. You find yourself going through the motions, smiling when you're supposed to, but not actually feeling much inside. This emotional flattening often happens because chronic stress affects dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. When dopamine levels drop, motivation and pleasure become harder to access. It's not that you don't care, it's that your brain has turned down the volume on joy to conserve energy. The problem with these emotional shifts is that they feed into each other. Anxiety makes you feel more irritable. Irritability can push people away, leading to isolation. And isolation deepens numbness because without connection, your brain gets even fewer positive signals. It's a cycle, and once you're in it, it's easy to feel stuck. But here's the hopeful part. Just as the brain can learn to feel less, it can also relearn to feel more. Small acts of emotional connection, texting a friend, stepping outside for fresh air, playing with a pet, can send signals to your brain that it's safe to engage again. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Even a few minutes of genuine connection each day can begin to shift the balance. One of the most powerful things you can do in this stage is to name what you're feeling. It sounds simple, but putting emotions into words actually helps activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that can regulate them. Instead of thinking, "I'm just off today," you might say, "I'm feeling anxious," or "I'm feeling disconnected." That small act of naming creates space between you and the feeling, making it easier to choose your next step instead of being pulled along by it. Emotional changes from stress aren't a personal failing, they're a signal. And once you can read that signal, you can start responding in ways that help instead of hurt. Next, let's look at how stress doesn't just stay in your head, it shows up in your body in ways you might not expect. The body remembers physical signs of mental strain. Your mind and body are not separate worlds. They're constantly talking to each other. And when your mental load gets too heavy, your body listens. Sometimes, it's the first to notice that something's wrong, even before you consciously realize it. You might start getting headaches more often. Not the kind that knocks you out, but the dull, persistent ache that sits behind your eyes. Or maybe your shoulders feel tight all the time, like you're wearing invisible armor. You stretch, you roll your neck, but the tension never fully goes away. For some people, stress settles in the stomach, indigestion, nausea, bloating, or sudden changes in appetite. You tell yourself it's just something you ate, but it keeps coming back. Fatigue is another common signal. It's different from feeling tired after a long day. This is the kind of exhaustion that lingers no matter how much you sleep. You wake up already drained, your limbs heavy, your mind foggy. Even simple physical tasks feel like they take more effort. These aren't random inconveniences. Chronic stress changes how your body operates. When you're under pressure for too long, your body releases stress hormones more often, which can increase inflammation, mess with your digestion, and weaken your immune system. It's why you might catch colds more easily or take longer to recover from being sick. Your body is trying to protect you, but living in this constant alert mode comes at a cost. The tricky part is that most of us try to treat these symptoms in isolation. We take painkillers for headaches, drink more coffee for fatigue, or try fad diets to fix digestion. While these might offer temporary relief, they don't address the real cause. It's like patching a leak without fixing the pipe. It's only a matter of time before the problem returns. I remember talking to someone who thought she was just getting older because her back hurt more often and she had less energy. But when she finally took a step back, she realized those aches and that fatigue started during a particularly stressful year at work. Once she made small changes to reduce her stress, her body began to respond. Her sleep improved, her headaches eased, and she felt more like herself again. The key is to see these physical symptoms as messages, not just annoyances. Your body is saying, something's off, pay attention. Instead of pushing through or blaming yourself, you can respond with care. More rest, gentler routines, time outdoors, or simply pausing during the day to breathe deeply. Remember, your body isn't betraying you. It's protecting you in the only way it knows how. The sooner you listen, the sooner you can work with it instead of against it. And if you catch these signs early, you can Let's talk about the burnout cycle you might not even realize you're in. The burnout cycle you don't notice. Burnout doesn't usually arrive with a loud crash. It's more like a slow leak. You don't notice it at first, but over time, it drains you completely. The danger is that it often feels like just being busy or just being tired, so you keep going, unaware that you're slipping deeper into it. It often starts with high stress. You push yourself to meet deadlines, to show up for others, to keep your life running smoothly. You tell yourself, it's just for now, or once this week is over, I'll rest. But the week ends, and the next one is just as full. You get used to living in survival mode, so you don't notice how much you're giving without replenishing. Slowly, your energy drops. You start feeling more exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. Things that used to excite you now feel like obligations. You might catch yourself counting down the days until a vacation, not because you're excited to go somewhere, but because you just want everything to stop. This is the second stage, emotional depletion. Your patience gets shorter, your focus wavers, and your mood dips more often. At this point, many people double down. They work harder, push through the exhaustion, and tell themselves they just need to be more disciplined. But that extra push takes more from an already empty tank. Eventually, you hit the third stage, detachment. You might feel disconnected from your work, your relationships, even from yourself. You do the bare minimum to get through the day. It's not laziness. It's your brain and body trying to protect what little energy you have left. The tricky thing about burnout is that it feeds itself. The more depleted you feel, the harder it is to do things that would actually help, like exercising, cooking healthy meals, or spending time with friends. So you withdraw, which leaves you with even fewer sources of joy or relief. The cycle keeps turning, and you sink deeper without realizing it. Breaking the burnout cycle doesn't mean quitting your job or disappearing from your life. It means interrupting the pattern before it gets worse. That can be as small as taking a true lunch break instead of eating at your desk, stepping outside for 10 minutes of fresh air, or saying no to an extra commitment. These tiny acts of rest signal to your brain that it's safe to come out of survival mode. Over time, they create the space you need to recover. One person I know started by adding a single, non-negotiable into her day, a short walk after dinner. It seemed too small to matter, but it became her anchor, a daily reminder that she was allowed to slow down. Within weeks, she noticed her energy and mood lifting. Burnout might feel like a permanent state, but it's not. The key is to notice the cycle while you still have the power to step out of it. And once you create even a little breathing room, you can start building habits that repair your brain and restore your balance. So let's talk about 1 point, those small, science-backed habits that can help your mind find its way back to calm. Small habits that rewire your brain back to balance. When you've been living in a state of stress or burnout for a while, the idea of fixing your life can feel overwhelming. You might think you need a massive reset, a long vacation, a complete career change, or a totally new routine. But the truth is, your brain doesn't need a grand gesture to start healing. What it needs is consistency in the small things. That's because of something called neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to form new connections and pathways. Just as stress can wire your brain into constant alert mode, simple, repeated actions can wire it back toward balance and calm. One of the most powerful small habits is movement. This doesn't have to mean hitting the gym for an intense workout. Even a 15-minute walk outside can lower cortisol levels and boost brain chemicals like serotonin and dopamine. It's not about burning calories. It's about telling your brain, we're safe, we can slow down. Another simple habit is mindful breathing. It might sound too easy to matter, but taking even 3 slow, deep breaths signals your nervous system to shift out of fight or flight mode. Some people like box breathing, inhaling for 4 counts, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding again for 4. You can do it at your desk, in the car, or before you fall asleep. Sleep is another cornerstone habit. Chronic stress can disrupt your sleep, but better sleep also helps repair the brain from stress. That's why setting a consistent bedtime, dimming screens an hour before bed, or creating a calming pre-sleep ritual like reading or stretching can make a bigger difference than you think. Creative activities are surprisingly powerful for brain healing too. Whether it's drawing, cooking, gardening, or playing an instrument, doing something with no pressure to be perfect gives your mind a chance to rest from problem-solving mode and tap into flow. It's like giving your brain a mini vacation. And don't underestimate social connection. Even short, low-pressure interactions, a quick call to a friend, chatting with a neighbor, sending a thoughtful text, can help restore dopamine and oxytocin, the chemicals linked to motivation and bonding. These moments remind your brain that you're not alone, which is vital when stress has made you feel isolated. The key is to start small. Pick one habit that feels doable right now and commit to it for a week or 2. Once it becomes part of your routine, add another. Over time, these habits compound, creating a stronger, calmer foundation for your mind to rebuild itself. One friend of mine started with just a morning stretch and a glass of water before checking her phone. It seemed tiny, but she noticed she started the day with more clarity and less tension. From there, she added an evening walk, then a journaling habit. Months later, she realized she hadn't had a full-blown stress spiral in weeks. Healing doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, gradual, and built on moments so small they're easy to overlook until you realize they've rewired your days. And one of the most effective ways to support this rewiring is to understand your stress clearly, which brings us to the next step, the power of naming exactly what you're feeling. The power of naming your stress. One of the simplest, yet most overlooked tools for dealing with stress is giving it a name. It might sound too easy to matter. After all, how could just putting words to what you feel change anything? But naming your stress isn't just about labeling an emotion. It's about creating clarity. When you can clearly identify what's going on inside, you shift from being trapped in the feeling to being an observer of it. That small shift opens the door to choice. Think about the last time you felt off. Maybe you woke up irritable, couldn't focus at work, and ended the day with a headache. Without thinking about it, you might chalk it up to just a bad day. But when you pause and ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling? You might realize it's not random. It's frustration from a conversation, or overwhelm from too many deadlines, or worry about something in the future. Once you know what it is, you can decide what to do about it. Science backs this up. Studies show that labeling emotions activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that helps regulate feelings, while calming activity in the amygdala, your brain's emotional alarm system. In other words, naming your stress literally helps you manage it better. For some people, this looks like keeping a stress journal. Each day, you write down a quick note about how you're feeling and what might be contributing to it. Over time, patterns emerge. You start to see that certain situations, times of day, or even people consistently trigger tension. For others, it's about speaking it out loud to a trusted friend or partner. There's something powerful about saying, "I'm feeling anxious because I have too many deadlines," instead of just carrying that tension in silence. It makes the problem concrete and gives you a starting point. The key is honesty with yourself. Many of us downplay our stress by using vague language. "I'm fine, just tired. It's nothing." But vague language keeps the stress foggy and unmanageable. Specific language makes it visible. "I'm mentally drained because I haven't had a real break in weeks," is a statement you can act on. You can't fix what you won't name. One woman I know started a nightly ritual of writing down her top feeling of the day in one sentence. At first, it felt silly, but within a month, she realized she was catching her stress earlier, before it snowballed. She started making small adjustments, like turning down an extra project at work or taking a midweek evening to rest, because she could see the triggers clearly. Naming your stress doesn't make it disappear, but it puts you back in the driver's seat. Instead of feeling like you're being dragged around by invisible forces, you can steer. And once you can steer, you can start moving toward not just surviving, but thriving. That's where we're headed next, learning how to shift from a constant state of coping into a life wake. You can actually feel present, joyful, and alive again. From survival mode to thriving. When you've been in survival mode for a long time, it can start to feel like the only way to live. You wake up, get through the day, and repeat. The focus is always on making it to the next task, the next paycheck, the next weekend. And even when you get small breaks, it's not the same as actually living. You're just catching your breath before the next wave hits. The shift from surviving to thriving doesn't happen overnight. It begins with small, intentional choices that remind your brain and body what safety, joy, and possibility feel like. Thriving means you're not just reacting to life. You're shaping it. You're making space for things that fill you up, not just drain you. One sign you're moving toward thriving is that you start to plan for things you want, not just things you need. It could be as simple as blocking off time for a hobby, booking a trip you've dreamed about, or saying yes to a new experience, just because it excites you. Another sign is that you're no longer running on constant adrenaline. Your days still have challenges. No one's life is stress-free, but you recover faster because you've built a foundation of habits, boundaries, and self-awareness. You start to notice that your reactions are more measured, your relationships feel richer, and your inner critic is quieter. To get there, it helps to create what I like to call a mental health toolkit. This is a personal collection of things that reliably help you feel grounded and supported. It might include a morning walk, a playlist that boosts your mood, a breathing exercise, or a friend you can text when you feel off. The key is to have these ready before you need them, so when life gets intense, you don't have to think, you just use your tools. Thriving also means giving yourself permission to slow down, even when the world around you is telling you to go faster. It's saying, my well-being is not negotiable, and living in a way that reflects that. The more you practice this, the more your brain learns that it's safe to relax, to feel joy, and to take up space in your own life. I know that if you've been stuck in survival mode, the idea of thriving might feel distant or unrealistic. But remember, you've already been doing something incredible. You've been surviving, That means you already have strength, resilience, and persistence inside you. Thriving is just the next chapter, one where those same qualities help you build a life that feels like yours again. You don't have to get there all at once. You just have to take the next small step, and then the next. Over time, those steps will carry you somewhere lighter, freer, and more alive than you might believe possible right now. So here's your reminder. You're not here just to make it through.